Hey, what's poppin', everybody? It's your boy Ichabod Slice. We over here on the west side, sunny, well, right now a little shady, Southern California, Los Angeles County. We're over here at the coastline checking out this ecotone today. So right now I'm sitting on a geologic formation known as the Altamira Shale Formation, which is a series of marine terrace deposits that were basically formed here, I think right around 5 million years ago. Just around the time when the San Andreas fault started. So with all that geologic activity, that plate tectonic activity, you got sliding, scraping, smushing, basically pushed up this land up and out of the ocean over all those millions of years. So what I'm standing on right now in this present time used to be old seafloor way underneath the ocean. And you can find a whole bunch of fossils in this rock, fossils of fish, you know, polychaete worms, tons of mollusks. It's a real interesting place to be. So I'm about to biologize this area starting from the top here, and then I'm gonna head down this steep ass trail all the way to the water line, and hopefully all along the way show you all the glorious examples of extant living creatures that call this present day and age home in this current location. Oh God, let's get it. So the first thing I want to talk about is right here where I'm standing. You can see that the ground here, like all the topsoil, is pretty bare, and this place usually gets mowed. But when it doesn't get mowed, you can see this area basically filled with a lot of non-native vegetation, and that's pretty typical of most areas here, especially in Southern California, especially in LA County. So a lot of the vegetation that might have been here has been extirpated and pushed out, and basically taken over by introduced non-native vegetation. And one of the examples, or actually two of the examples we got over here, both in the same family, Amaranthaceae. And this one right here, it's all dried out. So we got this right here. This is Salsola tragus, the infamous tumbleweed, and it's dried out right now. Those are kind of the old remnants of the flowers. Yeah, this is the famous plant that you see in all those old westerns, you know, blowing across the landscape and everything. They're not native here. They're native to Russia. I think the common name of this is called Russian thistle. And yeah, it seemed to find a nice home here. The other amaranth species we got right here, this is Atriplex sembiccata. I think it's also known as berry saltbush, also in the family Amaranthaceae. I think this is a native to Australia. It is not native here to California, but I guess the conditions in Australia are very similar to what we got out here. So when this was introduced, it basically took hold, and probably is here to stay forever. Okay, so I'm halfway down this cliff face, and I notice over here to my left, we got our first example of a native plant. That nice menacing bastard right there, that is Cylindropuntia prolifera, AKA the coast cholla in the Cactaceae family. And this is a pretty nice sight to see because it is a native plant, and you know, basically sitting in this kind of whole sea of non-native plants. By the way, the non-native plant that's dominant around here is this is Centaurea mellitensis, aka the Maltese star-thistle. Very, very like nasty, noxious, invasive, that was brought over from Europe, and you know, and basically will kind of take over any disturbed landscape here in Southern California. Man, it's everywhere. But yeah, this one right here, the Cylindropuntia, is you know, it's kind of nice to see. Hopefully it'll maintain its growth, maintain its persistence here in this spot, continue to propagate, and you know, basically do its best to kind of push out all the invasives that are growing around it. Hopefully, we'll see. And then over here we got this dried out example of Mesembryanthemum crystallinum, aka the tufted ice plant in the family Isoaceae, which is the family of all ice plants. Another noxious invasive from Europe, comes from parts of North Africa, Southern Europe, around the Mediterranean region. And I mean, as you know, Southern California is a Mediterranean climate, so it's no surprise that we just saw many examples of, you know, introduced species that also come from Mediterranean environments making its way here. Did I mention that it is wintertime here in Southern California and it's like 64 degrees? I just wanted to add that in there to let you know that I am not complaining. Okay, another native plant alert. Here we got Rhus integrifolia, aka the lemonade berry in the family Anacardiaceae, which is the same family as poison oak. It's got these nice waxy glabrous leaves. Pretty hardy plant, well adapted to this type of climate. You can see here it's kind of growing like a dominant along this degrading cliff face and everything, and seems to be doing quite well. So here right now we got some examples of a budding version. So I think these will eventually be flowers And you know, those flowers will in turn get pollinated, and I think they'll probably become fruits, I think by maybe like mid-spring, maybe even early summer. But yeah, you can see it's a dominant, it's growing pretty good out here, basically kind of doing its best to kind of push out a lot of the native, like all that brown out there, that's a lot of non-native mustard and all that stuff. And then, you know, you got this lemonade berry kind of, you know, making its presence known amongst all that, you know, basically creating that upper canopy that a lot of the non-native plants can't do out here. Okay, so I made it to the base of the cliff now, almost near the water's edge. And I'm looking at this stuff right here. And this is pretty important when it comes to ecology. Like all this stuff that's basically being deposited here on the beach is known as marine wrack. And this is kind of an interesting example to basically show you the types of marine wrack that can be found in this day and age, particularly here on the coast of Southern California. So like I said, it's winter time out here, and a lot of times in the winter, like the wave pressure can get pretty strong, significantly strong, that any, like, you know, seaweed species or kelp species that are basically hunkered down on rocks can become yanked loose and then drift in the water column until it is eventually deposited on land during high tide regimes, like we have here today. This stuff right here is, I think this is a Gregoria menziensi, otherwise known as feather boa kelp. You can see the pneumatocysts right here, the air-filled sacs that allow them to float in the water column. So, you know, they can get that good positioning for the surface area to photosynthesize. So yeah, these do have chlorophyll and they will photosynthesize to get their energy. So yeah, so other than the seaweed, you know, we got these sticks right here that kind of look like bamboo, and this is actually commonly mistaken for bamboo. But it's also in the grass family Poaceae. This is Arundodonax, also known as the giant reed, another noxious invasive coming from the Mediterranean region and making its new home out here in sunny Southern California. And it's a very persistent invasive too, very, very difficult to get rid of. It can create like huge stands, especially along fresh water. It can basically like crowd out all the pre-existing native vegetation out there, choking everything out, and very, very difficult to get rid of. You can see right here, this is actually a rhizome that this arundo would grow out of. So a rhizome is basically a horizontal stem that grows underneath the surface of the soil. This is where new shoots would eventually pop out. Moreover, let's say you're trying to get rid of the arundo and you're pulling all of that stuff out. You probably don't know that you're probably leaving chunks of this rhizome, maybe even little pieces of this rhizome behind. And from that little piece of rhizome, you can get a whole brand new stand of that arundo. From everybody I've talked to, it's virtually impossible to fully get rid of this stuff. We don't really have any means of controlling it either, other than, you know, just constantly ripping it out and, you know, tearing it down. Kind of like a larger scale mowing the lawn type thing, but it will never fully get rid of it. It's here to stay. It's part of the new ecology. So like I said earlier, all this wrack is basically energy sources that come from the marine environment and have basically been transplanted out here on a terrestrial environment. There's a lot of energy resources in all this stuff. I mean, if you think about kelp is a primary producer, right? So it's basically creating energy for itself using the energy of the sun. So there's a lot of nutrients kind of jam-packed into this. And one of the organisms that I'm confident in saying that has evolved to take advantage of these type of resources is an insect. And I'm gonna show you that in a second. And that is the insect right there. It's hard to film it close up because, you know, they get scared, skittish, and they fly away and everything like that. But anyway, that is Salsola frigida, otherwise known as the kelp fly. And there are literally thousands of them out here right now, just kind of perusing the rocks and likely taking advantage of all this like decaying seaweed sources that are out there. You can see that one's crawling on, oh, there's a bunch of them crawling on it right there. But yeah, they'll eat this stuff and possibly lay eggs in it, and their eggs will hatch, their larvae will hatch, grow, and develop, feeding on this dead, decaying seaweed. But the flies won't be the only thing eating this seaweed rack. If I can get in it a little bit, hopefully maybe I can. Okay, there we go. All right, so those right there, oh man, they keep moving away, hold on. Okay, all right, I don't know if you see those little orange things running around. Those are collembolans in the order Collembola. So you saw how it just jumped away right there? That's because it has this appendage on its posterior end known as a furcula, and which basically uses it to spring itself away when it senses danger. Hence the common name springtails. And of course, we are living in the Anthropocene, so included with all this organic rack material, we also have, you know, inorganic material like plastic. You know, we got styrofoam right there, more plastic from all sorts of origins and everything like that. You know, this is the new ecology. This is something that, you know, every organism on the planet has to deal with, and it's basically the new norm. Okay, making our way closer to the water here. I'm now standing in the upper intertidal zone. So this is basically the zone where the average high tide will basically get up to this point, and maybe not even past this point. Maybe on big storm surges, the waves, you know, will start blowing like a bunch of trash and other marine debris up on this section. But on average, this is basically kind of like the splash zone. So they're not getting really fully inundated with water. Rather, they're just getting splashed by wave pressure. And as you will find out in a sec, there are organisms that have adapted to this type of microclimate here. So by far the most numerous species that I'm seeing on these rocks is this gastropod here. This is Littorina. I'm not exactly too sure what the species is. It could be Saxatilis, and I think there's at least one more that this could possibly be. But yeah, order Gastropoda, just over here grazing the algae. So, you know, as water splashes up on top here, that bit of moisture can allow for certain algal species, you know, film algal species to grow on these type of rocks. And then you have these Littorina here that will graze upon that algae, kind of like little cows. The other more common species of snail, again, that I'm seeing here is this right here. This is Tigula funebralis, otherwise known as the black turban snail, shown here in high abundance. I mean, you can see right there. And you can kind of tell what they're doing. They're basically congregating along the remnants of this stock of giant kelp, Macrocystis pyrifera. And they're basically doing the same thing that those flies were doing earlier and taking advantage of the rack, AKA all the organic debris that's been pushed up by the wave pressure here. Side topic, I don't know if you've been noticing, but there are like these certain dark splotches on the rock. Here's another one right here. So this right here is actually tar, like the same tar that, you know, they would use in asphalt, same tar that you find at the La Brea tar pits and stuff. There's a natural oil seep way out there, maybe about 2 or 3 miles out there, where, yeah, it's naturally leaking oil into the ocean. And sometimes along with that oil comes these big chunks of tar that get released into the ocean and then will eventually get washed up on shore and sandy beaches. I mean, if you're a local here and you like going to the beach, especially, you know, like Redondo Beach, maybe parts of Cabrillo Beach and stuff like that, you might find yourself with a black piece of tar stuck to your foot because you unknowingly stepped on it. And, you know, it's kind of annoying for a few days because it's really hard to get off. But yeah, this is straight up tar, you know, like petroleum-based tar. Yep, smells like the gas station. So another observation you might have been making if you were really paying attention is that you see some of these rocks are, actually many of the rocks are pretty porous, meaning they got all these holes in them and everything. And, you know, when I first came here at first glance, I was thinking that, oh, maybe that was just how the rock naturally eroded. But upon further investigation and further research, I found out that many of these pores, many of these holes are, actually most of these holes were actually formed by biota. They're formed by life. They're formed by an example of life that you probably weren't expecting. So a lot of these bigger holes right here, these holes that are like, you know, about the size of my hand, I'm suspecting that these were caused or created by sea urchins. So sea urchins are also grazers, but, you know, they're in the phylum Echinodermata, and they are a grazing organism. So they are grazing on algae and seaweed, both seaweed that's been washed up and already living seaweed. And they have a specific mouth part or mouth structure called Aristotle's lantern because it's very ornate. And I'm assuming when this rock was inundated by water, however long ago, it was basically causing a field of algae to grow on it, and hence those sea urchins would come and graze on that algae. And usually what sea urchins will do is they'll graze in a circular pattern, hence creating these circular holes if they're grazing on it long enough, essentially. Also, you know, I think about it like if you're in an intertidal zone, if you're grazing and creating these holes are going to stay basically filled with water even as the tide goes out, creating these little micro tide pools, which obviously creates a moist environment, which will obviously promote algal growth and create a little micro ecosystem where organisms like this Littorina right here can graze on that algae henceforth. The other type of pores in these rocks that I'm seeing here are these smaller pores, you know, barely big enough to fit my finger. And again, when I was younger, didn't know any better, I thought that these holes were basically just, natural gas pockets in the rock or whatever, or softer pieces of sediment in the rock that would easily get washed away. But then again, I did some learning and I found out that these holes are also created by an organism, and an organism that I didn't expect as well. Is actually probably created by a clam. And that clam species is probably a species known as Lithophaga plumula. Lithophaga, lith meaning rock, phaga meaning eating, so it's like rock eating clam essentially. So it has hardened parts of its shell that it can use to kind of twist and turn around and basically kind of bore holes into soft rock. So what I'm saying is that these holes didn't occur when this rock was still mud or silt essentially. These holes were drilled into straight up rock by that mollusk. Well, that's wild to me. Go and learn something. And in case you thought I was bullshitting you about those clams, look right there. So that is undoubtedly some sort of bivalve shell. And from the looks of it, now that I'm looking at it, you see how it's got those little ridges? Oh, here might be a better example right here. You see how it's kind of got those little ridges right there? I believe this is telling me that this is a different species other than the one I mentioned earlier. I think this is Parapholus californica, which I forget the common name of it right now. But yeah, Parapholus californica is another bivalve species that has evolved to drill into rocks, such as this, Miocene shale type rock. I think it's a shale. I think it's Miocene. Regardless, what I'm trying to say is that this mollusk, this bivalve, bored into actual rock. Like it wasn't boring into this when it was mud. It bored into it as it was rock. And the reason it could do that is because how it evolved its shells. And it uses its muscular foot just to basically kind of turn itself around, essentially drilling more and more into this rock. It's just wild to me. Go and learn something. Okay, now sitting here basically at the middle intertidal portion. Nice, beautiful wave action going on over there. We're gonna wait for the tide to go down so we can get down into that stuff and not get crashed by waves. But for the moment, in the time being right now, I wanna talk about the type of rock formation that we're sitting on. So up there, that's the Altimeter shale, marine terrace deposits and everything like that. So it's sedimentary rock. But the reason why all that sedimentary rock, that old marine seafloor, is pushed up is because of what happened below right here. So this rock that I'm standing on right here, this is igneous rock, and I think it's a rock called andesite. Don't ask me exactly what andesite is. I'm not that much of a geology expert or anything like that, but it is an igneous rock. And so what happened with all that tectonic activity, magma plumes kind of popped up from underneath and basically pushed this land up out of the water. And you can see evidence of that right here. You got this igneous rock that's basically been pushing up all that sedimentary rock right there, and henceforth being eroded away by wave action and rain, and also tectonic activity creating landslides and stuff. This Altimeter shale formation is made up of very loose sedimentary rock. You can see it's got all those cracks and fissures and everything in it like that, making it very loose. And undoubtedly, these big chunks of this will end up falling back into the ocean, either due to an earthquake or a heavy rainstorm or something like that, and surely cause a fight between all these rich people and their insurance companies. Okay, going further out on our journey through this ecotone here on the Southern California coastline, the rocky intertidal. I'm kind of sitting here on the fringes or the margins of the middle intertidal and the lower intertidal. And now we're about to look at some critters that call this spot in the tidal zone home. So up top on this upper surface of this rock here, I've seen these other gastropod organisms right here. Now I think this is in the genus Nucella. The common name for these are called dogwinkles. I'm not entirely sure what the species is, maybe Emarginata, probably. I think that's the most common one. So it's a snail, so it's a mollusk in the family Myricidae, which is a family of snails that are known to have a pretty interesting way of feeding things. So they're predators and they're eating other mollusks mostly. Now, if you don't know anything about mollusks, they have this mouth part called a radula, which is basically like a keratinized section of tissue that makes it hard and rough, and a lot of many different mollusks have like teeth on them and stuff. Well, these guys' radula formed in pretty much into the shape of a drill bit, and what it uses that drill bit for is to drill into the shells of other mollusks, whether that be other gastropods or maybe even clams and abalones and stuff like that. Matter of fact, and this has been going on for like millions of years, possibly even hundreds of millions of years. There are many fossils of fossil bivalves and other gastropods that we find, and you find these little nice holes in them. And it's pretty safe to say that they've been preyed upon by an organism similar to this. Maybe not this exact species, well obviously not this exact species, but definitely a species with a drilling type radula. Try it off the rock, sorry for abusing you, but anyway, that's what it looks like underneath. So I believe this would be known as a right-handed snail because the opening is on the right hand, is on the right side of the shell. It has an operculum, and you'll see that close up right there, that reddish thing. That's an operculum. Oh, it's not trying to close up, it's trying to get away. But that operculum is basically a valve, a door, to close up when, you know, the tide goes out, and to prevent desiccation from the dryness of being out of the water. And that mushy part, that's its muscular foot that all mollusks have. And gastropods, gastro meaning stomach, pod meaning foot, so stomach foot. Its foot is basically on its belly essentially, and that's what it uses to move around. And as I was walking along this rocky shoreline, I'm looking at all these cracks in this rock, and you know, just putting two and two together with all the water and the wave pressure and everything, you know, all that water is going to flow through these cracks, creating various microhabitats for various organisms to survive. Ooh, and I just saw something here. I'm pretty sure you see that nice bright orange thing down there. If I can get my, hold on. Okay, so what we have right here is Pateria miniata, aka the bat star. So it's an echinoderm in the phylum Echinodermata. So it's in the same, you know, group of animals as regular sea stars, sea urchins, brittle stars, etc. And this is a little baby right here. It's only maybe about 2 inches wide. Different from other sea stars because it has, you know, for lack of a better term, webbing in between the arms and everything like that. So it's an echinoderm, and it'll use those 2 feet to kind of like, you know, slowly move around the intertidal. And with this species in particular, it is a scavenger mostly, and it will eat both, you know, algae type food sources and dead animals and detritus and stuff like that. They can get decently big, you know, like the size of your hand, but it's kind of cool to see one out here. And I can't forget to talk about the other barnacles that are out here. So the common name for these species is called acorn barnacles. They're either in the genus Thalanus or Balanus. I can't tell the difference between, but again, another cirripidian form of life found out here in the intertidal. And then for the other barnacle species we got right here, this is Tetracleta rubescens, otherwise known as the pink volcano barnacle. Another cirripidian crustacean here in the middle intertidal. Larger but less numerous than the acorn barnacle. And then right next above it, it's kind of closed up right now, but that's Anthopleura elegantissima, otherwise known as the aggregating anemone. See those cells there with a symbiosis of an algae known as zooxanthellae, where it can photosynthesize during the day, give the anemone sugars, and then the anemone, because it's an animal eating other animals, it can provide that zooxanthellae with much important nitrogen type molecules that it can use for DNA synthesis and replication and all that stuff. Aggregating anemone because they aggregate in groups. And we got the other type of anemone here. This is Anthopleura sola, I believe, or otherwise known as the sunburst anemone. They used to think this was the same species as elegantissima, but it wasn't until the year 2000 when they found out there was a different species. They kind of do the same thing. They also have that symbiotic zooxanthellae algae that it uses for photosynthesis, so it can get the sugars and everything like that. With those tentacles there, which have those stinging nematocyst cells, which I believe have a toxin that is neurotoxic, so it stuns whatever prey touches it. And they get pretty big too. You know, this one's about as big as my hand. Pretty safe to touch, although I don't really like touching them because it kind of disturbs them. I'd rather just leave things alone. But when you touch them, they feel a little sticky. And it's sticky because those nematocysts are firing into your skin. And you should be lucky that this species, at least, will not put you in the hospital. Okay, still here in the middle intertidal, and you see like these flat disc-shaped organisms right here. This is yet again another gastropod, and there's many different species of these here, and I really don't know how to tell the difference between each species, to be honest. But these are common names of these are limpets, in the genus Ladia, and all these species, as far as I know, are in that genus Ladia. And they're also a gastropod, so they're in the same group as snails and slugs. And these guys are basically like cows. They're grazers again, grazing on the microalgae that grows on these rocks. And they're shaped this way for many reasons. One, having that low profile kind of keeps you hunkered down on that rock again when there's that high wave pressure. And two, they're very territorial. They'll actually like kind of roam around and use one side of the shell to pry off competitors and everything. So we have this one species. I think this might be a file limpet. I don't know, I'm not sure. This one right here might be a finger limpet, Ladia digitalis, I think. But you can see that there's many different representations. All right, so now we're sitting in pretty much the lower intertidal zone, and the tide has gone out significantly enough to form these proper pools. And in these pools reside communities of marine organisms that have evolved to live in such of a habitat, where water is left behind. Every day, essentially, the turbulent wave pressure leaves and creates this period of calm. And just by looking at it at first glance, man, I'm seeing a lot of movement through here and everything. So I'm pretty sure there's gonna be a lot of organisms to look at and talk about. So let's get cracking. All right, let's start off with the algae first. So we got this stuff. I think this is in the genus Corallina. It's a rhodophyte, so it's in the group Rhodophyta, which is the group of red algae. And the red algae, or the Rhodophyta, is actually, I think it's one of the 2 algal groups which is contested to be the ancestor of all land plants. So these guys do photosynthesize, but they don't use chlorophyll. They use this other chemical called corythrin, which is basically stimulated by different wavelengths of light, which is why it's red and not green. And then we got this right here. Let me go grab it, take it away from these urchins. So this is another type of red algae. This is in the genus Bosciella, so it has somewhat of a different texture. Yeah, another type of rhodophyte that can be found in the intertidal zone. Okay, all right, ow, these are very sharp. All right, what I have in my hands right now, this is Strongylocentrodus purpurea, otherwise known as the purple sea urchin. Very common sea urchin here in Southern California, also in Northern California. As a matter of fact, in Northern California, these have become a pretty bad pest. It's a native species, but up in Northern California, they don't have the right predators to basically control the populations of these. And it appears here in Southern California, we might be experiencing the same thing. But these things are echinoderms, you know, so they have that spiny skin, is, you know, perfectly exemplified here by these purple spines. In between those spines, you have tube feet and pedicellari that'll be poking out. Basically tube feet to help them move around, grab food and everything like that. And the pedicellari also to grab food and also to basically bite off and chase away any colonial organisms that might land on these things, because these things move pretty slow. You know, they're not fast moving organisms. And looking underneath, so right there, I don't know if it'll do it, but yeah, that kind of like slowly pulsing thing, that's where its mouth is. And inside of that mouth, you'll have a structure known as Aristotle's ladder, and that's what it uses to basically kind of scrape and graze, take chunks out of algae and stuff like that. Oh, actually, you can see the tube feet right there, those circles, those discs. That's the tube feet that it uses to walk around, that all echinoderms essentially use to walk around. Most echinoderms, I should say. And surely, you know, they're using this pool as refuge from the high wave pressure that's out there. And, you know, a real nice spot to where you can see, you know, you got that green kind of filmy algae growing there, and almost undoubtedly this is what they're grazing on top of all the seaweed particles that are being washed in here by the waves and everything. So a reason why these things are invasive in Northern California is because they're basically eating the hell out of the kelp. You know, they're basically destroying the kelp forests out there, drastically reducing the amount of kelp forest canopy that can be found up in Northern California. I'm unsure exactly how much damage that they're doing out here. But I mean, I don't know, just at first glance, looking at how many there are, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the same case out here. I know up north, there's a predatory sea star that loves feeding on these things. And I think that's one of the reasons why that their numbers are out of control up in Northern California. In Southern California, there's a species of fish known as the California sheephead, Sembiccata pulcher, I believe that's the scientific name. Anyway, so those have these gnarly looking teeth, and which are perfect for biting through the spines and getting at the juicy, you know, nutrient-rich roe that's in here. The roe is basically the egg sac. I don't want to bust it open and show you because I'm not trying to be cruel to any of my viewers and anything like that. But, you know, if you look up a fishing channel where they're like foraging for these things, they break them open and eat the roe. And it's quite delicious, I will admit. All right, let's put it back. All right, next creature before it runs away. There you are. Get your ass over here. All right. All right, I've talked about this before too. This is Weeeesssst Siiiiiiide, AKA the blue stripe hermit crab. So it's in an infraorder known as the Anemura, which I think that's the group of crustaceans known as eight-legged crabs. They're not really eight-legged, it's just that their hind pair of legs have severely reduced in many species examples and everything. And with hermit crabs, at least, that allows them to basically live out their lifestyle. As you might know, hermit crabs, they will search for old shells like this dogwinkle here and basically use that as a home. And I suppose it helps to have, ooh, I don't want it to pinch me. Get back in there, get back in there. And I guess it helps to have that reduced hind pair of legs so you can fit in these type of shells. If you ever look up coconut crabs, those insular gigantism examples of crabs that can be found on islands in the South Pacific, they're in the same grouping as these hermit crabs. The coconut crab is just a giant hermit crab that has no need to look for a shell, essentially. Yeah, Weeeesssst Siiiiiiide, blue stripe hermit crab. Yeah, look at those purple sea urchins just going to town on that giant kelp. That's what they do. And they don't just eat dead kelp, they'll eat live kelp too. This is why they're a pain in the ass. Oh, remember when I was talking about those porous rocks and everything being created by those sea urchins? Well, here you can see them doing it right now in real time. You see that sea urchin is this nice hunkered, like cozy in that little pit that I'm pretty sure itself or another sea urchin made, or at least started, and this one continued it. So you can see how it finds refuge in creating and in engineering this type of terrain, essentially, this intertidal terrain. All right, this next organism is going to take a little bit of skill to get, so it's a good thing that I brought this net. Stand by until I catch it, okay? Let's just go for it. Oh, I got it. Okay, okay. I might need a container to talk about this. Hold on. Let's get it in there. All right, here we go. Okay, so what we got right here is a Ligocaudus maculosus, otherwise known as the tide pool sculpin. So it's in the order Scorpaeniformes. And you could tell that by those large, fleshy pectoral fins that it's got there. Family Cottidae, which is the family of sculpins, evolved and adapted to live in this type of habitat here. Basically, when there's regimes of high wave pressure, it's kind of hunkered down in between cracks and crevices. And when that wave pressure goes out and everything gets all calm, you know, that's when it comes around and starts playing, starts feeding, starts doing whatever these tide pool sculpins do. But very common fish found in all sorts of rocky intertidals, even sandy intertidal systems too, all up and down the west coast of the United States. Notice it's got those little like cirri on top of his head. That's kind of a distinguishing characteristic for these species. Again, look at how fleshy that pectoral fin is. And you notice like a lot of the fin rays, you know, going towards the bottom, they become thicker. And you know, that's something that all scorpaeniform fish use to kind of like basically remain attached to the rocks, hence why they're called rockfish. Some rockfish don't attach to rocks, but they all have that fleshy pectoral fin, and I feel that's what it was ancestrally evolved to do. Got that truncate face, and look, it's got that little cleft in its bottom lip. I wonder if that's a distinguishing characteristic too. Split dorsal fin, spiny rays and soft rays. Fine specimen. Oh, we got another anemone species here. This is Anthoplura xanthogrammica, the green sea anemone. I don't see too many of these on the mainland coastline. Last time I saw this was on Santa Cruz Island. But damn, look how big. That's massive, actually. That's like the size of somebody's head right there. Yeah, another species of, you know, sessile cnidarians here in the intertidal in Southern California. Okay, we got another example of an autotroph right here. I'm just going to break a piece off. All right. Okay, so I think, well, I'm pretty sure this is in the genus Codium. I think this is the species Codium fragile or Codium fragile. I don't know how you actually pronounce it. But yeah, this is I think it's a chlorophyte algae, so it's in the green algae family, but it has this morphology which gives it its common name, which is known as dead man's fingers. Very spongy. I'm not sure entirely if this is native here to Southern California. I believe there is a species of codium native here in California, but I believe that codium fragile originated originally in Japan, and it actually has become invasive in parts of the Atlantic. Pretty trippy seaweed in my opinion. I mean, look at that texture. Might mess with those of you who have trichophobia. But yeah, just another autotroph here in the lower intertidal. So I guess right now is kind of a good time to mention that, you know, if you ever decide to come out here and, you know, do biologizing for yourself in the rocky intertidal, you know, be very mindful that, you know, what you're walking on is essentially, you know, living things. Like everything is living here. Even like spaces in between organisms that you recognize are being occupied by organisms that you don't see at first sight, especially for those of you who have soft eyes. So with that being said, be very, very careful, you know, walking on these rocks. I just so happen to be in a spot that's pretty remote. You know, it takes a lot of effort to get down here, and you will see in portions along the coast, rocky intertidal sections along the coast that have easy access for people to get to, that the, you know, the intertidal community is nothing what it looks like right now. It's actually, a lot of it is bare rock, and you only see a handful of species calling it home. But you know, since we're in a remote spot, pretty much away from a lot of human disturbance, we have the ability to you know, full on observe the natural communities that have evolved here. Okay, so now right here we have the star of the show, somewhat literally. This is Pisaster ochraceus, otherwise known as the ochre sea star, and it's considered a keystone species here in the rocky intertidal, and obviously found mostly here in the lower intertidal and sub-intertidal. It's a predator, so it goes around eating mostly mussels, and they could do a good number on those mussels. I heard that like a single sea star can take out like tons of mussels and everything, so they're actually pretty beneficial when it comes to controlling like numbers of these California mussels. Although it's not enough to actually like really put a dent in it, as you can see, at least in the areas like this. I mean, like what I said earlier, you know, we have like periods of high turbulent wave pressure here throughout the day and everything. But in this pool, where it can freely roam around and everything, you know, these mussels are basically, you know, free pickings. Again, it's an echinoderm, and you can see like it's got its spines right here. These are these spines, and I think I mean, I don't know for sure, but I feel like these spines have evolved as basically kind of like a tough padding in order for it to squeeze into crevices, and then it can expand its body to basically secure it in a crevice to protect it from that wave pressure. They come in all sorts of colors, purples like this one, oranges, reds, pinks, kind of magenta, brownish ones too. High variation in color phenotype for this species. So if you're around tide pooling or biologizing in the tide pools and you see this, it's kind of a good sign that the local ecosystem here is doing pretty well. You know, because it is a keystone species, and habitats that support keystone species are usually known to be pretty good. Okay, we got another gastropod. Let me bend down and get it. Damn, this rock's sharp. All right, here we go. Sorry, man. Here we go. All right. Okay, what I have here in my hand is Weeeesssst Siiiiiiide. I forget the common name of this, but the scientific name was named after some, you know, naturalist in the 1800s named Norris. I guess that guy got lucky to have both the genus and species name after him. That kind of practice is kind of looked down upon today, but I guess, you know, back in the olden times, you could do that. Anyway, so yeah, another gastropod. You know, you can see its muscular foot right there. You got the operculum right there. Look at that nice reddish fleshy mantle on the edges of the mantle right there. It's a vegetarian or herbivore, commonly feeding on kelp species like that giant kelp macrocystis and the egregria. And oh, you can see it's got a little limpet right there on it. I think that's, it looks like it has two species of limpet. But yeah, Weeeesssst Siiiiiiide, named after some dead white guy named Norris. Now I'm well into the lower intertidal, bordering on the fringes of the sub-intertidal, and you can see that, you know, almost all this rock is covered in some sort of organism right now. By far the dominant species we got is this right here, Maltese californianus, the California mussel. a bivalve species. This species has basically evolved a means of hunkering itself down on these rocks, basically securing itself down with these little fibers right here. These are known as thistle threads, secreted by the mantle in order to give it these anchor points on these rocks, so you know, it doesn't get washed away by the wave pressure. Then we also got these barnacles intermixed with the mussels. Polycypes polymerus is the scientific name. So both the barnacles and the mussel have somewhat of an analogous or a convergent type of lifestyle in a way, and bear with me as I explain that. So the barnacles, basically they'll be swimming around as larvae, free swimming or almost planktonic larvae, and then until they find a nice spot on some sort of rock or a pier piling where they can settle down, and they secrete this cementing type of fluid, essentially, that cements them to the rock. And then from there, they maintain a sessile lifestyle for the remainder of their life. Their backs are essentially against the rock, and their legs will stick out of these little fissure openings right here when it's nice and wet, and basically use those legs to kind of filter feed planktonic particles out of the water so it can eat. The mussels will do the same thing. You know, they're planktonic as larvae. They'll be floating around in the water column until they find a nice spot on a rock or a pier piling again. And then what they'll do is they'll attach themselves with those byssal threads and then maintain a sessile lifestyle for the remainder of their lives as well. However, they don't have like little leg appendages that stick out when they open. Rather, they have an in-current and an ex-current siphon like all bivalves do, and they can pump water in and out, and that water carries with it planktonic organisms in which it can eat. And there you have it, the dominant organisms here in the lower intertidal. Mytilus californianus, Polycypes polymerus. Go ahead and learn something. Ooh, look what I got right here. Now we have a second urchin species. This is Mesembryanthemum franciscanus, aka the red sea urchin. You can see how different it is from those purple sea urchins. It's got larger, more stout spines, or a differentiation in spines too. It's got those large, long spines, and then in between those, it's got smaller spines. This is a small one too, so these can get way bigger. As a matter of fact, the uni that you might get in a sushi restaurant is probably from this species right here. The purple sea urchin by far outnumbers these sea urchins. Since it can be found in sushi restaurants, this is a prized food specimen right here. But I want to say studies are showing that these numbers are declining as opposed to these purple sea urchins. You can see like these purple sea urchins outnumber the red sea urchins at least 100 to 1. But cool, man, it's cool to see one of these. I hardly ever get to see one of these. He's just showing you again like the health of this ecosystem right here. You got the red and the purple sea urchin. Oh, and look what we got here. Ooh. Oh, what is going on right now? That is weird. What the heck? Anyway, that fleshy mollusk looking thing right there, that is Megathura crenulata, aka the giant keyhole limpet, and it looks like this one has its mantle over its shell. So it is a limpet, or at least it's considered a limpet, so related to those Ladia that I was looking at earlier. And it's a gastropod, and you can see that orange part right there. That's the bottom of its muscular foot. Its face is right there, looking straight at the camera. And this is kind of weird because like I'm looking at it, and if I zoom in a little bit, you can see those little collembolins on the surface of its mantle, of its muscular foot. And I want to say that those collembolins are eating something. I don't think it's actually eating the giant keyhole limpet. Rather, I wonder if this is similar to what species do on coral reefs. Like, well, they'll come to the coral reef, hang out on the reef, and let the organisms pick off any parasites or dead skin cells and anything like that. Basically, it's getting itself clean. That's just a guess. If anybody else out there who's a limpet expert or a rocky intertidal expert who sees this, please let me know. That's wild, though. Let me get you. Come on. You can use a net for arthropods as well. Oh, we got it. Okay, all right, here we go. Right here I have a brachyurine decapod right here. So it's an arthropod, subphylum Crustacea, in the infraorder Brachyura. Anyway, so this is Pachygrapsis crassipes. otherwise known as the striped shore crab because of these stripe markings right here. Now I think this is a male because that apron or that abdomen right there, that triangle portion is long and skinny as opposed to broad. Yeah, these can be found all over the rocky coastlines in Southern California. Highly adapted to the rocky intertidal. Or you can see, look at those mandibles right there. And then see that bubbling is because it's got appendages that will cause a flow of water to go in and out of its exoskeleton, or at least a chamber inside of its exoskeleton. So underneath this is an array of gill-like structures, and it has appendages that will pump water in and out of its body essentially to get that oxygenated water to flush over the gills. And it's also a predator and a scavenger. It'll eat dead things that wash up on the shore here, and it'll also actively hunt other small critters, you know, anything you can think of, worms, other crabs. And this one, although it is an adult, they can get much bigger than this. I would say at least double or triple the size. Not too sure if these are known as a food source. I don't really know too many people who eat these. I personally have never tried it. Nice classic arthropod right there, showing its nice classic jointed appendages and how those appendages have evolved and adapted to suit its lifestyle here. You see it's got its 4 hind legs, you know, basically posterior to those chelate front legs right there, which are claws, which are used for manipulating food, defense, grabbing stuff. And those hind legs are there to basically give it the ability to run along and scurry along all these rocks, so it can do its little crab thing. Yeah, Pachygrapsis crassipes, the striped shore crab. Okay, so I guess that's about it. I'd like to thank all you viewers for joining me here on this New Year's Eve biologizing the California coast here in LA County. If I haven't told you already, this is my home county. And you know, high key, it makes me proud to see that there's a good diversity of organisms here along this rocky intertidal system. I mean, we saw a lot of stuff today, not gonna lie. There's a lot of critters, a lot of life going on in this rocky intertidal system. This type of ecotone, this type of habitat going from land to marine, jam-packed full of life. It's a cesspool of life, essentially. It'll be interesting to see how this type of environment evolves with the proliferation of human activity and all that other jazz. But I'm sorry, I don't mean to end this on a negative note. I'm just trying to stay positive of all the things I saw today. I'm glad to share with you a little bit of the local flora and fauna that can be found out here. And I really appreciate y'all watching, however many of you are still watching me. I know I don't put out videos consistently, but you know, I'm gonna try to work on that. Just keep me subscribed, you know, and be on the lookout for anything new that comes out. And I pretty much reached the peak of the low tide, or the bottom of the low tide, and I can see that wave pressure is starting to push back in. So I better run my ass out of here before I die. So once again, I appreciate y'all watching. Be on the lookout for further videos. I will come out with them, I promise you. I just don't know when. So with all that being said, keep your decisions scientific. Stay away from all the gimmicks. I'm Ichabod Slice. Peace up. Peace out. Learn something.